Alright, welcome back to another Star Wars video. First of all, as always, the support on my last video is absolutely mind-blowing, and I'm so thankful for each and every one of you who has shown support these past few weeks. Reading all of your points in the comments has really opened my eyes to a lot of branches that I'd love to talk about in future videos. But to stay on topic with the main part of the video, who is the actual owner of the Darksaber? Well, to understand how one rightfully obtains the title of ownership, you must know the history of the Darksaber and the processes that the wielder has to go through to qualify. Before we get into the history of the owners, what exactly are the rules to rightfully obtaining and owning the Darksaber? The two that I'll be focusing on in this video are, how does someone own it, and what has to happen for said someone to lose ownership of it. For someone to rightfully own it, they have to have either won it in combat, inherit it from their mother or father, or claim it when it has no true owner. For someone to lose it, they either have to lose it in combat, die, or both. But with the rules out of the way, let's get into which Star Wars character actually owns the Darksaber. Starting off, we have Tar Vizsla. Tar Vizsla was the first owner of the Darksaber after he created it when the time came to create his own weapon as a Jedi. That's right, not only was he a Mandalorian, but also a member of the Jedi Academy. After some time had passed, he left the Jedi Order and was sent off to Mandalore, where he would later become the leader of the Mandalorians. Now, while I couldn't find a set time of his existence, it is factually known that he lived before the fall of the Old Republic, meaning he most likely lived from 1000 to 1500 BBY. Quickly following, the Jedi Order themselves are next. The Jedi held ownership of the Darksaber after their former member, Tar Vizsla, had perished, and yet almost as quickly as they obtained it, the Darksaber was soon stolen from the Jedi Temple by Clan Vizsla. After the weapon was taken from the Jedi and put into the hands of Clan Vizsla, its meaning and value expanded, placing the owner in a position of power not only for the clan, but over every Mandalorian, and even Mandalore itself. Once taken during the fall of the Old Republic, it was passed down by the ancestors of the next rightful owner, Pre Vizsla. Pre Vizsla was the owner of the Darksaber during the Clone Wars, and even explains its history to Obi-Wan Kenobi in the Star Wars The Clone Wars TV show. The nationalistic chauvinist known as Pre Vizsla was the ruler of Mandalore for a fraction of the duration of the Clone Wars. But, according to the rules of the Darksaber, even if he continued to wield it, and many after him did so as well when defeated in combat, the victor of that battle has now become the new rightful owner of the saber. And if we follow this rule, in Season 2, Episode 12 of The Clone Wars titled The Mandalore Plot, Obi-Wan Kenobi defeats Pre Vizsla in a duel that was challenged by Pre Vizsla himself, placing Obi-Wan Kenobi as the rightful owner of the Darksaber by then. Now, although this is pretty much correct, before Obi-Wan is able to finish the job on Pre Vizsla, other members of the Death Watch are able to step in and fire missiles at Kenobi, knocking him into a pit and claiming their victory. Now, since it would be nearly impossible to track which member fired the specific missile that knocked Kenobi down, I'm going to keep the title of the ownership with Pre Vizsla, simply for canonical and simplistic reasons, for the viewers and my sake of understandability in the video. But with all that out of the way, let's move on to Pre Vizsla's next defeat. In Season 5, Episode 15 of The Clone Wars, Pre Vizsla is finally defeated by the next ruler of Mandalore and leader of Death Watch, Maul. After winning his battle and beating Pre Vizsla to his last breath, Maul beheads him and rests his tired body on the throne of Mandalore, claiming his place as leader. Although, even with his new claimed power, there was one force that would end his validity in that spot, with that force being Darth Sidious. In only the next episode of the Clone Wars, Maul and his brother Savage would come to an embarrassing defeat at the hands of Darth Sidious. After showing up unannounced on the planet of Mandalore, Sidious confronted Maul, complimenting him on his survival after his defeat to Obi-Wan in Star Wars Episode 1, A Phantom Menace. Maul explains to Sidious that he's built all of his fortune and power from the ground up in hopes of returning to his side, only for Sidious to disregard it all and claim Maul to be a rival in his attempt to have power over the rest of the galaxy. And with that, their battle was off, dueling from the tops of Maul's throne to the sea level of Mandalore. Now, with his brother gone and all hopes of continuing his fight for the galaxy at Sidious's side, Maul had used every ounce of rage inside of him to attempt one last attack on Sidious, with his single blade in his right hand and the Darksaber in his left. Even after using every last bit of force and strength that he could, he was still no match for the Supreme Leader and future Galactic Emperor. Now victorious, torturing Maul down to his last wails of mercy, Sidious had become the new rightful owner of the Darksaber. Now, as most of you know, we never actually see Sidious wield or use the Darksaber, even in combat. Now, many would assume that he never knew the rules of the Darksaber, and therefore never claimed his right to ownership, but this is simply not true. And in fact, he was one of the most knowledgeable beings in the galaxy. He just didn't care. As simple as it may seem, he truthfully just didn't care at all, or even feel the need to wield the Darksaber. Even though he may not care at all, the Darksaber was still in his possession, by rule if not physically. So until his death, or his defeat of another, he owned it. A quick back and forth that we see in Star Wars Episode 3 Revenge of the Sith nearly changed this for Sidious. As most of you know, Jedi Master Mace Windu defeated Darth Sidious in a lightsaber duel just before the call of Order 66 and the elimination of the Jedi began. As Mace Windu had Sidious at saber point, ready to strike him down, Anakin Skywalker stepped in with the belief that Sidious was the only way of saving Padme and sliced through Windu's wrist, disabling and disarming him. This gave Sidious enough time to sit up from his fetal position and blast Windu out of his office window with his Sith lightning, once again naming him victorious and maintaining his right to the Darksaber. The next time that we see Sidious come close to losing his title in canon is when he actually does. In Star Wars Episode 6 Return of the Jedi, while Luke Skywalker, Darth Vader, and Darth Sidious are all in Sidious's throne room, Luke is crying out to his father, begging him for help. Sidious's force lightning melting Luke's body and frying his mechanical arm caused Luke to feel a pain that he's never felt before, a pain so excruciating he'd feel it for months on end after it ended. But after rising from the floor after his defeat to his son Luke, Darth Vader, or as I'd like to think of him at this point, Anakin Skywalker, sees what the Emperor is doing to his son. He sees the horrors that his son is being put through. He sees himself. Vader has been manipulated for decades by Sidious, and he could see the same thing happening for Luke. For Vader's whole life, his lack of a father, the father that he always needed, was continuously his demise into madness and depression. Once he had finally received that father of 8, Qui-Gon Jinn, that was ripped from him, forcing his master to care for him and ultimately failing to do so. Vader realized in that moment that he needed to be the father that he never had. He needed to be that for Luke, Anakin whispered under his breath. No. While looking from Luke to Sidious, his tone heightened. No! As Anakin turned to his left, he picked Sidious up over his head, carried him to the reactor shaft, and threw down not only Sidious, but every ounce of hatred he had left for him and the rest of his foes, leaving him only with his son that he never had, and in the position that he always needed. Now killing Sidious, Anakin Skywalker had become the rightful owner of the Darksaber. Soon, Anakin would pass in Luke Skywalker's arms, and due to the rules of the Darksaber, the new heir would be the eldest of his children, that being Luke, who even though would become the owner of the Darksaber, like Sidious, he would not actually wield it at all, partially due to his lack of knowledge of it at the time, as well as the literal lack of the actual Darksaber in 1983, when Return of the Jedi would release. Now, some may ask, since Sidious technically killed Vader with his Force lightning, wouldn't the ownership go back to Sidious? Or since he had no children, whoever to claim it next? Well, no. Since Sidious died before Anakin, his name was wiped from the candidates who had owned it, leaving only Anakin, and soon Luke, on that pole. Although, following that rule, since Luke never actually had kids in canon, after his death in Star Wars Episode 8 The Last Jedi, the Darksaber would now, finally, after years and years of reluctant owners, be up for grabs on whoever's hands they may be found in next. Which begs the question, who do you think we will see wield the Darksaber now that Luke Skywalker is gone? Well, that does it for this video. If you have your own theories on the Darksaber, or just theories in general, I'd love to hear about them in the comments below. If you enjoyed, it'd mean a lot if you liked and subscribed with your notifications on so you know every single time that I upload a new video or go live to play some games and chat with you all. As always, if you have any topics or ideas that you personally would like to see from me, let me know down below, whether it's Star Wars or not. But with all that being said, I hope you all enjoyed, and may the Force be with you.